Okay, guys, very welcome back to the show. And I have a very, very special guest on the show today, a man that I've been trying to get on the show for quite a while to talk about his journey in the movie and the TV world from such a young age to where he is now. Mr. Clint Howard, thank you for joining me today, man.
Well, I really, really thank you, Maurice. You seem like a really, really pleasant fellow, and I think this is going to be a pretty good conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, what I describe these conversations is just two guys just sitting down in the sitting room, very formal, just having a little conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally I ask people like, how did you decide that you wanted to get into the movie and TV world? But from looking at your story, it doesn't look like it was a decision for you. It looks like it may have been made because you got into it so young. Do you have any memories about, or if you can give people background on how you came into the life, even at 2 years old?
Well, as a little tyke, yes, I have no memories myself. I was
Yeah,
acting before I really kind of knew what I was doing. I started when I was two and a half, more like it.
yeah,
And it was on the Andy Griffith Show. My brother Ron was playing Opie on the Andy Griffith Show, and I was being taken down to the set regularly, kind of to be babysat because mom would look after me, and then when normally my dad Rance Howard, who's a wonderful, he's passed away, he's a wonderful man. He was sort of our acting mentors, and he was our dad. He was with us on the set the majority of the time. But once in a while, when my dad would get an acting job or some other business that he would have to go away, mom would go down and take care of Ron. And I came along onto the set of the Andy Griffith Show. And just the production people, they took a look at me, specifically a director named Bob Sweeney. He sort of recognized, he invented this bit in his head. He thought it would be funny, and he asked my parents if they would put me into the show, and they agreed because Ron had done it successfully. Ron had become a child actor for 3 or 4 years by the time I came along. So anyway, I started working on that show, and then once people realized I had an aptitude to be an actor, I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I had an agent, and I started getting jobs.
yeah. How does it feel like? How did it feel from what you can remember being a child actor? And then you see a lot of people in Hollywood, you see a lot of examples of when people get into the business so early that they fall into problems later in life, whether that be with drugs or alcohol or things like that. How did you maintain the lifestyle of being in the film business to where you are now? Like,
Well, I personally always enjoyed it. I mean, I just,
mm,
listen, we come from a family of people in the entertainment business. My mom and dad, Rance and Gene Howard, they were in the business long before Ron and I came along. They loved the business. They loved the spirit of the business. They understood it. They were both from the Midwestern part of the United States. They were both, from Oklahoma. And they had this really salt of the earth, common sense approach to things, and neither one of them were intoxicated by the entertainment business at all. So for them it was a wonderful opportunity to earn a living and have good adventures and be around very interesting people. And that attitude just sort of rubbed off on me by osmosis. I developed that attitude. I always enjoyed being an actor. I enjoyed the game that it was, playing cowboys and Indians with just absolutely superior toys. You know, I mean, listen, I remember doing jobs as a kid when I was do a Western and get to dress up in that old Western motif and be around the cowboys. And it was what a blast. Who wouldn't want to do it?
yeah,
You know, and then a little bit later on, I was introduced to animals in the world of entertainment. I was in a television series called Gentle Ben, where I was the star of the show with a 650-pound black bear. So for a little while, for a couple of years in America, and then throughout syndication and everything, I was the little kid pulling on the bear's chain. And I had a wonderful time down in Florida working on Gentle Ben. And that started when I was, 7 years old, 7, 8, 9 years old. By that point, I'd already had some experience in the business, and I understood it. And my dad was right there with me when I didn't understand something. He would teach me and guide me. And it was, like all the jobs I had were very, very pleasurable. I'll tell you what, I didn't have any question that I didn't want to be, or that I wanted to be an actor, into my teenage years. It wasn't those teenage years when all of a sudden, the social life at school was important and playing sports was important. And, maybe grabbing that 3-day job on that Western wasn't that important if it was going to take me off the baseball team or, especially in high school. In fact, in high school, I did not work much. And because I was, first of all, I was a journalist and I was working on the school newspaper since I was a sophomore, and I enjoyed doing that. And I enjoyed playing on the baseball team. I was a 3-year participant in a 2-year varsity letterman at Burroughs. So which was my high school. So during that time, no, my focus was on being Clint Howard, the teenager, not necessarily Clint Howard, the actor.
Yeah, you appeared obviously in a massive iconic franchise in 1966, which was Star Trek. When you look back on that, how proud are you to be involved in in a franchise like that? Looking back on it,
Oh boy, Maurice. Yes, proud, satisfied. You know, I get it, and I'm very honored. You know, I didn't have a lot to do with it.
Mhm.
I was 6 years old, and apparently my agent sent my dad a phone, sent him a phone call, and said, "Listen, they want to test your son to play a part in this new science fiction show." Star Trek was barely on the radar. I only knew that it was a science fiction show. Lost in Space was a show that preceded Star Trek as far as the world out there in space. So, I was fascinated by it. And then I heard that I was going to play a 500-year-old alien. And I thought that was really cool. But as far as I had no idea what the Star Trek legacy was going to be, you know. And in fact, Maurice, I have a little story about that legacy, and I really want to share it because
Yeah.
I didn't appreciate my involvement in the Star Trek franchise when I was younger. And it wasn't until I probably hit 45 or 50 years old that I fully understand that, the Star Trek thing was a lot bigger than I had ever imagined. And these fans were not just geeks. They were really true, sort of smart, thoughtful people that embraced the original programming, the role that I played, and people were very tickled that a child my age could participate in creating entertainment like that episode from Star Trek, the Corbomite Maneuver. You know, um, but anyway, listen. When I was in my 20s and my 30s, I it was great to be on Star Trek, but come on, I'm an adult actor. I want to do adult things. And that was when I was a kid. In fact, and I wrote about this, my brother and I wrote a book called The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family. I'm not sure if it got a release worldwide, but it certainly is available on the internet through Barnes and Noble and the various places that sell books. But Ron and I wrote a book about our childhood experiences and throughout our careers, starting when I was little, and of course Ron started when he was 3 years old. Um, but there's a chapter in the book about my experiences working on Star Trek, and my memories included my perception of what legacy was. Because when I was about 17 years old, I had a chance to audition for the role of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars.
Wow.
It was way before there was videotape. If they wanted to see if an actor might be right, the only way they could see would be as if they called him in for an audition. And 20th Century Fox and George Lucas, they were auditioning hundreds of actors, maybe not hundreds, but a lot of actors. And when I went in one particular day, there must have been 30 or 40 actors out there in this big waiting area outside at 20th Century Fox Studios. And I remember Mark Hamill was like behind me. Mark was might be a year older than me, but we used to kind of audition together, various projects. He was a kid actor. So I saw Mark Hamill, and I was getting ready to go in and audition for this cool Star Wars movie. Didn't know much about it. I was playing this character, and I learned my lines, and I was going to go in and audition. And I went into the room, and the room Francis Coppola was sitting in the room. He's a confidant of George Lucas's, and Francis had already made his mark in the world. And I was blown away that Francis Coppola's in the room. And I looked around, and there was another guy that I recognized, a guy named Gino Havens, and then another guy, a guy that happened to be a casting associate on the Andy Griffith Show, but a guy that was a confidant of George Lucas, a guy named Fred Roos. He was in this room. Now, I didn't see George at the time. And the reason why I know this cast of characters is my brother Ron had been in American Graffiti. So I kind of knew about George, and I knew about the way they did graffiti, and it was really exciting. And I was, that made even going on this audition more exciting for me. I'm in the room, and I don't see George. George is actually turned around in a big leather chair. And when I come into the room after a beat, he swings around and he looks at me and he goes, "Commander Baylock, Corbomite maneuver." And in my head, I'm going, George, get an effing life. That was an old science fiction television show that and here's the real thing. Here's the personal ego bruise. He's bringing up something I did when I was a baby. And when I was 17 years old, I was trying to get an adult role. I was trying to get an adult job. I was getting ready to step out into the adult world. And here is this man that I respected in a room with Francis Coppola. And the first thing that the director says is he does a throwback of me when I was an baby, And so obviously I didn't get the role. I wasn't bitter. In past years, I've mentioned it to George, what happened. He doesn't have any memories of those casting sessions, really. I mean, he saw hundreds of people. But what caught his eye was that I participated on Star Trek. And when I hit about 45 or 50 years old, I realized that scenario of people looking me in the eye and going, "My God, you were Commander Baylock in the Corbomite maneuver." I mean, Jesus, it means something to them. And it clicked for me that, my God, I should be friggin' grateful, because if I'm not, it makes me come off like a real a-hole. And I'm not an a-hole. I'm a very grateful, humble person. And what it's led to has been fantastic, because I get to have conversations about it now. I get to appreciate it. I get to ask these people questions. I've gone to Star Trek conventions and had many, many doctors. People hand me their business card, and they got doctorates, and they're mission leaders at NASA, flight directors at NASA, scientists at NASA. I mean, the Star Trek, the fandom at Star Trek is pretty high level.
Very diverse, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So anyway, and you're going to ask this question, or at least talk about it. I've been in Star Trek. I was in Deep Space Nine. I was in Enterprise. I was in Discovery, and there's a new series called Strange New Worlds that at this point, unless I got conked in the head and I don't know what I'm talking about, I worked on the show. So coming up in a brief time, I will have been in, what is that? My fifth Star Trek incarnation. And my God, what a feather. I mean, I'll take it. In fact, I'm going to throw my shoulder out, patting myself on the back.
You remind me kind of what you said there. I had Tony Moran on my podcast, and he was in the original Halloween '78. Now, he played a very small role in it. He played when Michael Myers was unmasked, and he kind of told me the same thing. That why would people want me for a convention? I was on screen for maybe 2 or 3 seconds. But that's the thing with the fans of these franchises, like Halloween, like Star Trek, like the convention world it's a crazy world, but it's a great hidden gem for people that don't know what it is.
Oh, yeah. Listen, science fiction, the conventions are really interesting. The horror conventions, are fascinating to me. I've been around long enough to really see the horror convention evolve into something that it wasn't 25 years ago. So I'm it's very interesting because of course after my experiences as a child, getting to do a lot of wonderful work with Henry Fonda and Jack Elam and Ben Johnson and Maureen O'Hara, and getting to work, of course, with my brother a lot. All of a sudden, then, because I'm a working actor, I fell into some pretty choice horror movies, not by
Mm.
design, just they were calling for auditions, and I would go down and audition for Evil Speak, for Ice Cream Man, for Ticks. These are all jobs people remember me as iconic figure in these horror movies, and they're jobs I just simply auditioned for, you know. And the interesting thing about Evil Speak, that was one of the first jobs I did as an adult, as a guy on my own. I was 19 years old and I'd worked a few times, but never had the lead role in a movie. And getting the lead in Evil Speak was a big deal for me. And getting to do, to play Stanley Cooper Smith, it was something that I'm still very proud of. I thought it was a pretty interesting movie. I know in the UK it was labeled a video nasty for years, and I found that to be to be part of a video nasty. That makes me feel so dirty.
What was it banned in the UK?
I guess so. It was labeled a
Wow.
video nasty, whatever that means.
Never even heard that term, but I
Yeah,
assume it's probably some kind of ban.
it was you know, Evil Speak kind of gave me a title to be introduced into the horror world. And then of course, a movie that I did a few years later, actually in the early 90s, called Ice Cream Man.
Yes.
Really cemented my place in the horror world as a guy that can, carry the goods, carry the horror. And that was a fun experience to work on. And boy, as far as horror fans connecting with me at horror conventions, it's a blast to have people, multi-generational people now, come up to me, having they'll tell me exactly where they were when they saw the Ice Cream Man for the first time. My wife and I, Kat, we go to about a half a dozen conventions every year, and we have a great time. And we always get a hoot. We get a hoot, and people come up and tell us Ice Cream Man stories. This last horror convention that we went to, my Kat and I were sitting there at the table, and this couple came up and they started telling me this story, how they watched Ice Cream Man on their wedding night.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, I hope you didn't get through it all the way to the finish. And they went, oh, no, we didn't. But to think that they would queue up Ice Cream Man on the most sacred night of their lives, it says something about the movie, which I think people ought to investigate it. And as a matter of fact, about Ice Cream Man, the original filmmaker, Norman Apstein and I have remained friends over the years. And we finally, about a year ago, we decided, we threw down the gauntlet with each other and said, we are going to create another Ice Cream Man. We're gonna make a movie where I'm gonna play an Ice Cream Man, and it's not a sequel. It's not a sequel to the original. The only thing is I'm getting hired to play an Ice Cream Man, a 60-year-old Ice Cream Man who's kind of bitter. And Norman and I, one of our goals in the movie, first of all, we want to fulfill the genre. We want to give the fans what they want, but we also want to sort of to show the pathos of, well, what makes a guy put body parts in the ice cream? What possible scenario could we invent that would make it okay so the audience will cheer when he is dropping body parts in the ice cream? And listen, Norman and I are having a blast. And also my wife, Kat, she's one of the producers on it. And we've done table readings of the script, and the process, sometimes it slows down a little bit, sometimes it speeds up. We have partial funding. We're trying to get the material just right so we can go ahead and kick this thing in the ass, hopefully sometime later on this year.
Excellent. That's great news, because I know that movie in particular has a lot of hardcore fans, like you described the couple at their wedding, for example.
It's been, what, and one thing, let me just bring this up about horror fans. They've gotten better over the years. I'll tell you, when I first started going to horror conventions, it was pretty sketchy. It was it was not necessarily all that friendly, especially by the time Sunday afternoon came along. A lot of these people started, sobering up or unwinding, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah,
There was a lot of people that would come to the table Saturday morning and they'd be kind of like this, and they wouldn't have any money in their pocket. They would have spent it all. I mean, it was just more of a hardcore crowd. And just over the years, uh, you know, even people that are devotees of Rob Zombie's movies. I mean, Rob Zombie makes pretty hardcore freaking movies, man. I mean, how his version of Halloween was loud and were in your face, and his trilogy of movies, including the one that I worked on, Three from Hell. It's hard. These are hard movies with adult frigging concepts. But the people that come up, they're just fans, and they're not weird. They actually in an odd sort of a way, they've kind of got their own kind of culture now, you know. And well, we love going to them, and they listen. They appreciate me, and I'm now. Listen, I don't take that for granted, Maurice. That when you have people appreciate you, it's like, well, friggin' good. Good, thank you. I means my work has paid off over the years, and getting back a little bit about to the acting thing. One of the in my mind, the big negative about being an actor is the general insecurity of it, because I don't care who you are, when the phone doesn't ring, when those jobs don't happen, if you go 6 months of your life without employment, wow, it just changes the way you think. It rubs you. It rubs you, Now later on in my life, I can kind of, I realize statistically I'm okay and I'm gonna make it and everything. But when you're younger, friggin', the insecurity of that unemployment is poor. It's really nasty. So that was as far as the business affording me an opportunity to do all sorts of wonderful things and experience wonderful things. The one thing that I did experience in the course of my lifetime is that insecurity.
yeah. And I can totally understand that, and you can tell that, it's a tough world when you are waiting for that phone to ring as well. And I can only imagine how it is these days with the amount of actors and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a very very
Oh,
key point.
I certainly would not want to dive into the business at this point in the way things are. I just, I'd try to find something else to do, but that's not the case. And also another thing, and this is something that I'm carrying on in the tradition of my dad, is that, if there are young people are they come up to me and they're really interested about the business and they really would like to be entertainers and they'd like to somehow get into the entertainment business. um, I just be honest with them. It's hard. You got to make some tough decisions. However, never put a wet blanket over somebody's dreams, because if it was easy, then everybody would do it. You got to kind of say to yourself, well, yeah, the business is friggin' tough. Well, I'm tough too. I'm tough. I'm hanging in there. So but listen, I do tell young people in their late teens or early 20s, when they really come up to me and in a cerebral way, they want to ask me questions about breaking into the business. I would tell them, well, listen, if it is your life's passion, if it is your life's passion to somehow entertain people, God bless you. And the world needs entertainment. That's one thing that we've all learned out of all the depressions. No matter what, the entertainment business survives and even thrives in bad times. you know but you have to learn. You got to learn to be frugal. And another thing that you have to also understand, it is probably a 10-year process to determining whether you can find a place in the business.
Yeah.
I've had people out here in Southern California. They come up to me and they say, "Oh, I'm gonna be in the movie business. I've been out here for 3 weeks, and I'm gonna stay another 3 weeks." And I and I'm just going, "My God, man! You know, in 6 weeks, you're not even gonna learn where the toilets are." In
Yeah.
3 years, in 3 years of hardcore investment in this business, you're barely going to have any networking skills. You're barely going to know how to massage contacts and make things happen in that way. It's Jesus. You got to give yourself. Hopefully in 5 or 6 years you can have some progress to show. But
Yeah.
really, I would say a decade. After a decade, if you're still spinning your wheels, well, then maybe you should find some place to go sell shoes.
Any memories of working on the Waterboy, another iconic movie with Mr. Sandler?
Oh, well, Adam is awesome. Adam Sandler is a friggin' one dandy human being. He works hard. He's funny. He doesn't crave attention. He's a great team guy. He's a great guy to be at the tip of the spear. Everybody rallies around him. And working on the Waterboy, I was really impressed. I only worked on that movie like 3 days. It's amazing. They flew me from Los Angeles down to Florida to Orlando, and they had all of my stuff lined up. And I worked for like 2 days, and then I flew home. And then they did some reshoots back in Los Angeles. They had some specific things they wanted to do, and they brought me in for one day. And I shot, and people think and I am throughout the movie. Me and Alan Covert, our two characters, show up throughout the movie, and yet friggin' it was, when I flew down there, it was wild and woolly for a couple of days, and I flew home.
And he's he doesn't look like he's aged a day in his life for a man in Hollywood, does he?
Well, yeah, he has. If you look,
Yeah.
of course he has. We all age. I don't know. He's a good dude. I think he knows how to have fun. I think he knows moderation. I never saw him on the set be distracted. That's one thing. And early on, remember, I was well into the business before there were cell phones and pagers and friggin' texting. And, a lot of people now, a lot of stars, they're just stuck on this thing. They're just, all day
Yeah.
long. They're focused. The director will be doing a phone call over here. Oh yeah. Let's do that shot again. That's no way to run a business. I never saw Adam on his cell phone. That doesn't mean he doesn't get on it from time to time, but it wasn't like he was stuck on it. His focus was, he understood leadership. Being the director of a movie is like being the coach of a basketball team. You got to understand what what the goal that you're trying to accomplish is, and then you've got to do your homework. Do your homework and figure out how best to make that plan happen. And then each and every day with your team of filmmakers, you make it happen. And listen, I don't care who you are. Making like Adam Sandler, it's not a one-man show. He has a wonderful team of people around him that make him comfortable, that help him with the material, that create a good environment for him to be creative. He never directs one of his movies. He always has a really capable guy that he trusts, that the Frank Caraccioli, oh man, I'm brain locking on his last name. He was the guy, Frank Caracci. He was the guy that directed Waterboy, directed a couple of Sandler movies. It's just that everything would end up going through Adam, but good team guy.
Yeah. Austin Powers, of course, was another one that you were involved in several movies there, and that's kind of stood the test of time as well. What was that like?
You got to take your hat off to Mike Myers. I mean, first of all, Wayne's World was really friggin' funny. And then he goes and just absolutely smashes it out of the park with these 3 Austin Powers movies. 2 of them were absolutely brilliant. I thought the third one got a little silly. And of course, if it's not your cup of tea, you'll think all of them were silly. But I thought Mike Myers, very inventive guy. And I'll let you in on a little tip, Maurice. I worked on those shows for a few hours each movie. I was only on the set of the first movie for 2 hours. I was only on the set of the second movie for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom. They had it planned. They knew what they wanted. Jay Roach, the director, the fellow that Mike had entrusted with sort of shaping the movie. I think Mike is a little like Adam Sandler, where ultimately, even though there was a director, all things kind of went through Mike Myers. Although when I worked on the all three of the Austin Powers movies, I did not see Mike Myers on the set the day that I worked. He
Okay.
was in costume. He was in wardrobe. He was spending 3 hours in a chair to look like fat bastard. While they're putting him in the makeup chair for 3 or 4 hours to become fat bastard, the easiest thing in the world to do is go over to this one set and shoot Clint Howard. So I never saw him. I mean, I've met Mike a time or two, but I've never, we didn't work together on that movie.
Are you still making the snow globes?
Yes, I am, and I'll tell you what. Yes, I slowed down a little bit, but I have a project now that I'm doing, and with the help of some other pretty talented people and my wife, Kat. We are doing snow globes to commemorate our wedding celebration, which has now become an anniversary celebration. Kat and I got married in the middle of COVID. I fell in love with this woman, and boy, oh boy, I was so smitten. And we were in the middle of COVID, and I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and Vegas opened up. And I said to Kat, I go, babe, I know this is not, a dream of all women, but let's go to Vegas and get married. And we did. And we had a wonderful story. Our love story is filled with all sorts of crazy stuff. And anyway, but one of the things that I sort of promised her is that when we do have this a party to commemorate our wedding and our lives together, that we're going to have it at the table settings. There's going to be a snow globe, and we're going to put that snow globe down on these individual tables. There'll probably be 12 or 15 tables at this party, and we're going to watch the patrons fight over the snow globes, because not everybody's going to get to go home with one, and they're going to be really cool. They're really cool. I took great pride in coming up with kind of fun ideas to make my one-off creative ones. And, I've done simple ones, and then I've done ones of like Randy Quaid jumping the reservation, flipping off the audience. Politically, it was probably not,
Are
cool.
these are the globes going to be based on who's sitting at the tables, or is that coming into your mind at all, or are they just
Oh,
random?
no. It's us. It's
Yeah.
us. It's my wife and I we actually are going to have a couple of different poses, and just my sense of humor. And my wife shares this, is there's going to be one pose where we're doing some 3D modeling, and we're going to be our backs are going to be next to each other, and we're going to be like doing this. So when we put the subject in the snow globe, it's going to look like that we're holding the snow globe up. So that's just kind of our sense of humor. I did a snow globe where I had a snow globe inside of a snow globe. I do some kooky stuff like that. I did one snow globe where these homeless people were fighting. I don't know why. So anyway, I just come up with weird stuff. And so the answer is, these won't be weird. They will be
Different.
No, well, it's my wife and I celebrating our wedding. It's there, but hopefully with a little bit of the old. I call myself, when I put on my snow globe outfit, I'm the snow globist. The snow globist. I can talk in third person. The snow globist really likes things to be offbeat, because I am the snow globist.
We're going to finish up now shortly, but I always ask this question to people: is like, do you have any memories of like a script that you ever got for a role and you were like, no way am I doing this, without mentioning what it is? Like, why wouldn't you take a role if you got a script? What would put you off? Or you can give me an example of one that you may have got that you didn't like, without mentioning.
Well, listen, I learned a wonderful story from my dad, as I became a teenager and into my early adulthood. And actually, the example was working on Evil Speak, because Evil Speak had some questionable themes. I mean, a boy gets possessed by the devil and kills people. A boy gets possessed by the devil and cuts people's heads off. Conjuring up the devil. I mean, it's God. I mean, I'm not an overtly religious guy, but you don't have to be overtly religious to understand when you're messing with good and evil in a violent way. It's something you should take pause in. Anyway, I read the script, I auditioned, and I won the role. So I go to my dad and I said, Dad, I got kind of an issue here because it's a great part. It's the lead of the movie, but yet he does some really nasty stuff, and the movie has some nasty themes to it. And Dad, he understood. He read the script, and he agreed it was a good script. And he thought about it, and he goes, son, if you don't do the job, somebody else will. It's not that you turning the job down is going to make them stop making this movie. So
Yeah.
listen, it's just a movie. It is just a movie for all people. We don't make snuff films. This is all just fantasy and entertainment. Some of it gets
Yeah.
pretty rugged. Rob Zombie gets pretty rugged. I'm not going to name a detail, or I'm not going to name a specific thing, but Rob asked me to do a movie, and I didn't. I read the script and I said, Rob, I'm pretty uncomfortable about doing this. This was nasty stuff. And he understood. He's since hired me, so it's not, he didn't hold it against me, but it was just at that particular moment, I didn't really want to participate in, just as it was nasty. I'm not sure which movie it was, and I probably wouldn't say it if it was. Here's on a funny note here on getting a script or getting an offer and turning it down. And I was being a real little a-hole at the time when I did this. But I'd had some success in the business as an adult, and I got an offer to be one of Fred and Barney's bowling buddies in the Flintstones, the original movie that had John Goodman and Rick Moranis. And it was much like the cartoon where, they'd go to the bowling alley and Fred and
Yeah.
Barney would have his buddies. And there was like 3 or 4 guys that were going to be Fred and Barney's bowling buddies. And it was going to be a couple of weeks worth of work. The part wasn't all that great, but listen, to be in a good movie like that, funny movie. But for whatever reason at the time, Maurice, and it baffles me now. Well, it doesn't quite baffle me, but it was stupid. I didn't want to wear those fur-skinned outfits that they were going to make these actors wear. I mean, and sure enough, if you go and see that original movie, I mean, these loincloth, fur-skinned things that all the actors were going to wear, I just felt like it was silly, and I didn't want to participate, making me at that time a real little a-hole because I should have taken the job.
Yeah. Yeah. If you knew then what you know now, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you've got too many regrets in the business anyway. You've had a very storied career.
No, well, thank you. Yes, I know. Of course, there are jobs I didn't get, and situations where maybe if I would have done it a little different, things would be a little different. I mean, listen, everybody has those in life. But generally speaking, for a guy to say I've got 60 some odd years in the entertainment business, you know, and I am where I am with I got a beautiful wife, and we have a daughter, a 13-year-old daughter, and being a dad is a blast. I'm being a dad a little bit later in life, but it's fun. I wouldn't want to change much. I certainly wouldn't want to change any of that stuff.
Yeah, excellent. For people that might want to follow you on social media, I will put your links underneath. But just for the fans, then, as we wrap up, have you got any projects coming up that you can talk about at the moment?
Well, okay. This past year, I was in a movie with Nicolas Cage called The Old Way, which is a good example of me as a 60-year-old man being a character actor in a movie, and it's a fun Nick Cage Western. Nick Cage plays this gunslinger that kind of has to go and find his 6-shooter and start killing people again. And he has to bring his 12-year-old daughter along with him. And that actress is Ryan Armstrong, and she's a very strong actress. And it was a good opportunity to participate in a movie, but also working on Ice Cream Man. For the people in the horror genre, look for that to come down the pipeline. And we certainly are going to use social media. We're going to certainly keep people abreast of of the comings and goings, and we try to bump the word up and get people excited about it using social media. Mostly we do Clint Howard official on Instagram. I have a Facebook page, but my wife and I really enjoy the Instagram, and it's fun, and it's fun when we go to conventions when people stop and they want to talk about our adventures that they see on Instagram. It's as I coined it a few years ago. It's like having everybody has their own newsletter. Everybody at the snap of a finger can print out their own newsletter. It's what's going on in the Howard household, what's going on in Clint Howard's world, and it's fun. I personally don't like to get it too personal, and I don't like to tell people
Yeah.
what to do too often, but mostly it's just it gives me a chance to connect with fans and friends, and so Facebook, I'm at Clint Howard, and I'm sure there's some bogus Clint Howards out there, which pisses us off.
I'll put the
That
real
really
ones
is.
underneath.
Oh man, the people that try to be me on the internet,
Yeah.
it's just shitty. It
It's
really
mostly
is. They ought to just
fucking scammers looking for money out of people.
yeah,
That's the problem.
yeah. And my wife and I are always on the alert for that. They want stuff. They want to talk to girls or something like, you know, and that could end up, coming back on me in a big way.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
anyway, but we are Clint Howard official, and I think if you go to that on Instagram, and you'll see my fingerprints all over it because it's pretty funny stuff. And of course, my wife Kat, she's got her attitude. It's we have, like I said, we have a really wonderful time.
Yeah. Clint, we might get in contact then again when Ice Cream Man is about to come out. And it was a pleasure to talk to you today, man. Absolutely loved it.
Oh no, well thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We people need to buy ice cream in Ireland, right?
Oh, yes. We need to keep
Yeah.
that train going
What's your favorite flavor?
of ice cream. I'm
Yes.
very plain, so I'm just going to say vanilla.
Okay, well, you know what? The ice cream man will make you up a batch of vanilla. Be very tasty. It may have some bits in it, but it'll still be tasty.